There's this character named Wendy. I found out that Andrew Sorkin based Wendy off one of your fictional books.
I play myself in my book. And the idea I came up with was to put it in a story. I do things in the book that I did not do in real life.
Cristiano, Ronaldo, Muhammad Ali, Alexander the Great. Were they really emotional people?
Well, my answer is going to be yes. They really want to be the best footballer in the world. That's desire. That's an emotion.
I'm scared of losing money. I'm just scared of what people think.
That's actually very common. Even in the hedge fund business, they often are afraid of what people will think of them. I lost 15 pounds. It just fell off me. Why? Because seeing that sunlight sets your cortisol flow from what your cortisol slope is. Our bodies know what time it is and what hormones to release by sunlight.
Thank you so much for taking the time today to come on the show, Denise. How I first came about you was I was a big fan of the show Billions, and there's this crazy character named Wendy. She's so cool, and I'm like watching, like, is this real? And then I'm on Google, is there a real life Wendy? And then you would come up on all these different articles. Then doing research, I found out that Andrew Sorkin based Wendy off one of your fictional books. And I was like, oh wow, so like, but then Denise, she does a similar thing. So is your fictional book similarly loosely based on your own life, or is it completely different?
I play myself in my book. And I played myself in my book. Like, I wrote it in a fictional envelope because the executive editor at McGraw-Hill one day said to me, I want you to write this book so like your hedge fund clients would read it, but I also want to read it. And I thought to myself, how in the world am I going to write a book about the psychology of trading for the professional and then like for your average investor? And the idea I came up with was to put it in a story so that anybody reading it would be sort of reading it through the eyes of the character. But I play myself. I mean, I have my own name. I do things in the book that I did not do in real life. I mean, similar to real life, but not exactly. And Andrew, I mean, what exactly happened is a little bit of a mystery, but like this article, I think this article was in the newspaper. I don't know this for sure, but it sure seems like that article was in the New York Times originally to help them sell the show to Showtime CBS. Like, they had this script and they had this character and they could say, see, this is a real character. This person really, like, a person like this really exists. I think when you look at the timeline.
Yeah, I think what fascinated me with the character was that Wendy had ability to even coach and support, say, Bobby, the main character, Bobby Axelrod, and he was this billionaire hedge funder. He was switched on, he was driven, but when push comes to shove, he comes to Wendy, and I'm like, wow, like this person plays a very crucial role. And then doing research into you, like I didn't know that this was a real thing, having sort of a full-time, what would you call that position?
Well, people call it performance coach, but that's sort of because they don't know what else to call it. Like, and there have been, psychiatrists in the role, psychologists in the role. I mean, there are a lot of hedge funds that have someone in this role, and certainly more so since the show, but really since Steve Cohen hired a guy named Ari Keeve back in the 90s, who was a psychiatrist. And there's a handful of people that do it now that, I mean, I'm generally professional friends with them, but we're also competitors. But they use the term performance coach. I don't love it, but it may be actually, when I think back, I sort of think the show used that term and then that became more the term, but I don't really actually remember. And I never quite know what to call myself, because what I really do is help people make better decisions. Like, I help them sort through whatever their area of expertise is, whatever their analysis is, and like whatever their confidence levels are, and then conversely what their fears are, and sort through all that subjective data to help them make the best decision.
Denise,
So what do you call that? I don't know. What do you call that?
would you sort of lean closer towards a psychologist, psychiatrist, or would you lean closer to like Tony Robbins?
Oh, I would definitely lean closer to a psychologist or psychiatrist. I am both. I'm, first of all, emotions as information. which is to a large degree unique to me. Now, that is based on neuroscience, but I'm also about let's understand all the emotions and understand what repetitive patterns we have and how that might be like reflecting our past experience, as opposed to you have to be confident, you have to take charge, you have to believe in yourself. I don't do that kind of thing.
Talking about emotions, how do you know if your emotions are there just because you're just exhausted from a long day of work, or if you are having a bunch of shit happening and it's like, okay, I'm emotional due to my surroundings? Like, for example, last night, it felt like I had so many things going on. I had to have an early night to prep for this, and my mum had some issues, my dad had some issues, my employees are pinging me for this and that, and some plans I had for the weekend were falling through and changes were planned, and I was just like really like, wow, a lot. And then I had an early night, and now I feel completely fine despite the situation still being the same.
Yeah, I mean, so human beings are one integrated system like a car. So, like, the quality of the gasoline matters. Is there oil doing whatever it is that oil does in a car? Greasing the skid, so to speak. Like, are the tires working? Like, it's reciprocal, right? You need all those parts. So, physical energy is a big part. And when you have physical energy, you're going to have the feeling that you can cope. Where if you're physically tired or fatigued, everything's just going to appear to be a bigger problem. And then the aggravation from it is going to be greater. But once you know, like these pieces are all working together, and you learn to put the feeling in the proper bucket, like recognize it, analyze it, assign it to its bucket, and then understand it, you can get a lot better at using the pieces of the feeling that are giving you information and ignoring the ones that are just because you're overly tired or you were way aggravated with this situation. So this tiny problem someone else brings you isn't as big of a deal, or you don't need to blow up on them because you're really aggravated with this bigger thing over here. And so generally the advice has been like, try to set it all aside, right? And like be rational and logical and like suppress all that stuff. That generally doesn't work. It like the feelings come back, you act them out, they get exaggerated, they get distorted. There's all sorts of ramifications of that. But if you just learn to identify your subjective experience, like everything your body's telling you, because it is physical, and then sort of sort through it and tolerate it while you're figuring out what it's really about, you inevitably make better decisions and like choose better actions. So like if I were in that situation and that happened, I'll just go, you know what? I'm just going to bed early. I'll think about all this tomorrow. Sometimes we would want to like solve things right away, right?
Yeah.
I have a lot of research to support what I say, but for one example is fatigue makes us misperceive risk. So if we're tired, we'll look at some situation and think it's less of a risk than it actually is. So it's like, okay, remember that. If you know you're tired, don't make a big decision,
Talking about sort of,
Anyway, go on.
sorry for cutting you off, Denise. You mentioned sort of reading your system, reading your emotions, reading your body. Like if I'm looking back at the last 5 months since 2024 started, I'm constantly reading that, man. Like I've been exhausted this whole year. And, recently the last 3 days I've been getting a lot of sleep, 8+ hours each night. I'm starting to feel rested, but I'm still pretty tired. I don't know if that's due to me interpreting things wrong, or maybe I'm going through growing pains, because this year I'm at sort of financially, I'm at my limit, emotionally, socially, everything's sort of strained to my limit, and I'm sort of working the most I've ever done. So is this just growing pains, and eventually I'll get used to these new conditions and the exhaustion will start fading away?
Well, that's what it sounds like at first glance. But I'd also say, like, if you were my client, I'd be like, okay, when do you think this started? What were some of the first events that you remember? I mean, I do want to say as a tangent, like this has been a really weird year for me. And basically everyone I know says it's been a weird year. There's just been just weird things happening. So I don't know if we're in some sort of universe, weird thing happening, but I would just go back to like when it started and then go through what you think and how you feel about each aspect of that, trying to figure out which one has the most influence or leverage and see if we can get that one sorted out, because then the others will probably get easier. Your feelings about one aspect are probably bleeding over into other aspects and then vice versa. And it's kind of all mixed up. So I would try to pull it apart and go, this is when this started. This happened. I think and feel this way about that. Then in this realm of my life, that kind of did change. And this is what I think and feel about that. And just get all that data out. And like, even if you just get accurate about that, it'll probably make you feel more optimistic. Like, okay, I've got a realistic picture of what's been happening for me and where I'm at. And then it's sort of easier to choose, okay, this is the priority within, let's say, those 4 or 5 arenas. And if that's the priority, what's the most important thing I do in that arena? And then that'll have the same thing where you'll feel better about that arena, and then that'll influence the others, would be how I would tackle it.
Got it. So I'll share probably another personal anecdote. I don't want to be too selfish with this podcast, but I think this example might help others that are listening as well. I think when you asked that question, the biggest thing that came to my mind over this year is I'm like bleeding out. The company's bleeding out. We're running out of money. I'm starting to have to pull resources from, my mum has some money that I've set aside for her that just sits in her account. I'm going to have to pull that. I might have to start selling some assets, some crypto, some watches. But ideally I wouldn't want to, but my cash standing is like basically very near zero. And that's probably been the biggest stress. And I've been learning to process that emotion, feel the weight on my shoulders, feel the anxiety, still be grateful for every day, realize that I am very lucky to be in Australia and have a roof over my shoulder. Sometimes I'm going through a day not thinking about it at all, and sometimes I do think about it, and I think that's probably the biggest thing. So I guess the question would be, for people that are underweight, stress, what's the best way to cope?
Well, I'm going to start with be honest with yourself. So what the human brain does is it constantly predicts the future from the perspective of, will I be safe or not? So, and it's constantly trying to turn our attention to, will I be safe in the future? And we can't stop that. And in totality, it helps us. Now, we can't, it is also normal that people like exaggerate the risk, distort the risk. But generally, people are, first of all, taught to push those feelings aside, like the worries and anxieties. People are told that they shouldn't do that, that actually adds stress. But what the research actually shows is if it's a legitimate worry and you try to push it away, actually your system, your psyche is just going to make it more intense because it wants you to solve the problem of your future safety. So that's the be honest, like, okay, what am I really worried about? Like today, I have a hedge fund client who's in the hedge fund world. If you leave one shop and you go to another shop, you have to take garden leave, it's called. And you're usually off somewhere between 6 and 12 months. So while this person has been off, they've started to get worried about like what the situation's going to be in the new place they're going to. And I think partially because they're not working, they're like, it's starting to get exaggerated. If they were actually working and moving forward, they wouldn't be as worried about it. But because they don't really have that much to do, that's like sort of all they have to think about. So I said to them, are you panicked about it? And he's like, no, I'm not panicked. And I'm like, worried? We finally settled on a bit worried and annoyed that he was worried. Because it's like itching, like the worrying is like something annoying. And at the moment he said, okay, I'm worried and I'm annoyed that I'm worried, you could see him take this, but he went, by accurately naming the degree of the feel, what the category of the feeling, some sort of fear, the degree, not panic, but concerned, worried. I mean, I think concerned and worried are two different levels, and that he had this other feeling about being annoyed about the way he felt, like just the accurate assignment, he felt better. But we get all this advice to push the feeling aside, to talk ourselves out of the feeling. Like, now what it's really meant to do in its pure form is say, like, are you prepared for this next level of your career? Like, that's really what the concern's about, right? So in its pure form, that feeling has a purpose. So I'm always working with people to do that for themselves in their situation. Now, one practical way people can do it, but they're disinclined to do it, is say, literally, what's the worst that can happen? Now, the answer to that may sometimes be catastrophic or existential, but that's the brain, like, making sure that you're avoiding it, like saying, this really bad outcome could happen unless the feeling's meant to turn your attention to how to prevent the problem and increase your chances of surviving and thriving. But basically, everyone's told to talk themselves out of a feeling, suppress the feeling, talk themselves out of the feeling, think positive. And the brain's trying to go, Andy, like, you need to take steps to make sure this works out okay. Essentially, once you're unconscious, realizes your conscious is aware of, like, the ultimate threat, it tends to calm down and the worry tends to dissipate, ironically. Like, so, I mean, this snowboarder, I taught her, she does snowboard cross, which is the 6 snowboarders racing down the hill and jumping over, and it's intense and dangerous. She's like the all-time medal winner in the world in this sport, but she struggled in the Olympics. But she was so good because she was so good technically on the course, like figuring out when she could pass people in the air and whatnot. She said she didn't get out of the gate like as fast as, she usually wasn't the first person out of the gate. I taught her to just, like, if she was afraid in the gate, to just be afraid. And what do you think happened? She started getting out of the gate faster. I have a picture of a client who races cars in Hong Kong. And he said, there's this one curve that I always lose time on. Like, it's hopeless. If I could just not lose time around that curve. I taught him to scream exactly how afraid he was in the car. I was like, nobody can hear you, right? And he made it around the curve the fastest he'd ever made it around the curve. Because, I mean, there's, like, good reason to be afraid of going around the curve, right? And so his body was, like, taking his foot off the gas, putting his foot on the brake, whatever, because, like, okay, I could die here. But as he put that feelings into words, then his brain saw that he was consciously aware of the risk. The intensity of that feeling dissipated, and he didn't have to take his foot off the gas, or at least not put it on the brake. I don't know exactly which it was. But
Interesting. And
people are afraid to do it.
And is this something that you would say once, or would you then, or is it something you would repeatedly do, constantly remind yourself, like
all the time? What am I feeling and why? Trying to answer it accurately all the time. I mean, different scenarios in life or circumstances demand more or less. Like, I have a new client now that's really challenging, and it's great. I'm happy to have the client, but, like, I'm doing it sort of not constantly, but I'm doing it frequently. I'm a little worried how this conversation is going to go with this person. Okay, what am I really worried about? I'm doing it a lot. And my client that's on, garden leave is a little bit ruminating. And so I told him, I said, I want you to just basically say, I'm worried and I'm annoyed that I'm worried, as much as it comes up, like, as much as you physically experience. If you're not experiencing it, you don't have to try to feel it and articulate it. But if you sense that energy, just try to say, but you want to get the level right. Like in the realm of fear, is it, concerned, or is it panicked, or anything in between? And when you get it right, you'll generally feel it. Like you'll feel a sense of relief that, I don't know, your conscious mind has articulated what's actually going on, not unconsciously because you're feeling it, but it's more understanding what the unconscious or subconscious is perceiving. That makes sense?
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was sort of running through the fears in my head. It's sort of like, the fear of like, I'm scared of losing money. I'm scared of having to sell assets, and now I'm losing face with the people around me. I'm scared that even if that doesn't work, I run out of money and now my employees are going to have to be let go. I'm scared of the pain they're going through. But then I'm even more scared of having to then try to figure things out on my own. And I'm scared if I can't figure things out on my own, I might have to go and find a job. But then I know I can probably go through my contact list and someone in my network could probably offer me a job. So I'm probably more scared of losing face and like going from being this sort of self-made entrepreneur for the last 7-8 years to now working a 9 to 5 just like all my peers, and how maybe they'll look down on me, and I'm scared of the embarrassment. I'm scared of looking down upon. I'm scared of the hearing, I knew he wouldn't make it. So I'm scared of what people would think or say about me. So I'm just scared of what people think.
That's actually very common. I mean, even in the hedge fund business, where you have these people who, have these fancy educations in finance, and they've, worked at big banks, and now they work at some hedge fund and they manage a lot of money. They often are afraid of what people will think of them. And it often takes the form of like, if this trade goes wrong, or this trade is going wrong, and I sort of think I should get out, but maybe I should make the trade bigger. Well, gee, whichever one I do, will I end up looking stupid? So human beings are programmed to be concerned about what other people think of them. Now, then that's because on one hand, most of the time it doesn't matter, but at its very core level, in order for any of us to survive, we need other people. Some of us need other people more or less, but we exist within communities of people. And even if it's only just that we do this job and they do that job, but it's a risk to be ostracized. So that's why people that's legit. It's actually a true thing. Now, is it as true as it feels to you, or as true as it feels to my client? Usually not, right? Like we exaggerate that. But at its core, it's true. It's hard to survive if you're ostracized and on alone. So at its pure form, worrying about what other people are going to think is not irrational or illogical. It's not from a, basic human survival point of view. So what's better is you just did it. You just admitted it. Now, I would say, you listed a series of things. You did something that we haven't talked about yet. The thing the human being is always doing is predicting. Like the best neuroscience says, we're always predicting everything. Like you and I are even predicting the words out of each other's mouths. That it's not stimulus response. It's not 5 senses. It's not, I pick up this glass, my fingers touch it and it's cold. It's, I know it's going to be cold, so it feels cold. And predicting what happens to us. So we're predicting everything, and we're predicting what it means to us. You showed that just now because you went, if this happens, then that happens. So it's helpful for people to realize we predict. And at the core, the prediction's helpful, but it's usually exaggerated and distorted. But if we get accurate about what we're predicting with no judgment, you have to do it with no judgment at first. So then you can say, basically, what are the probabilities? What's likely? What's not likely? What can I do to move this in the direction I want it to be. It's much easier to figure out the best thing to do to keep oneself safe if they have an accurate assessment of what they're actually expecting, even if it's distorted and catastrophic. What I see happen over and over again is people will do this prediction like you did, then this is going to happen, and then I'm going to have to get a real job, and then I'm going to be embarrassed. And then they kind of sit with that and go, well, first of all, there's maybe a 20% chance that will happen. So I got 80% to work with to prevent that. And if it did happen, yeah, it would be unpleasant, but I wouldn't be dead. Like, it's at that point when you have it all out on the table that you get more rational about it. And you get in that, like, the things you choose to do, where you choose to put your energy and time and effort tends to be way more effective than if you're trying to like pretend none of that exists. You don't feel that way and just stay hyper with activity. Like, it makes you able to be much more strategic. Anyone, I'm saying you.
That makes sense. Like, as I was running through the probabilities in my head, it now pushes me to increase the revenue generating activities I should be doing and lessen, because I don't know if I've been just pushing it to the side, but I would distract myself. I enjoy doing podcasts, I enjoy creating content, I have to do accounting, I have to organize all my company files. These are all things I need to do, but I probably should do it less and increase the output of revenue generating activities. Like, in my mind, I'm like, let's say there's an activity that I need to have a 6-pack for. Rather than doing ab workouts all day, I'm doing a full body workout each day. Then maybe for this time period, I might have to do abs only.
Yeah. What happens, you get it all out on the table if it's honest and accurate. The very first thing I said is be honest with yourself. It gets way easier to see the most important thing to do. And then it's easier then to say, okay, I really should do that. I should let some of this other stuff go. But most people don't get there because they're taking all this well-meaning but misguided advice about overcoming those feelings, setting those feelings of anxiety aside, not being negative, blah, 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 blah. When in reality, their brain's trying to keep them safe. Now, there is a big complicating factor, and that is the predictions we make are going to be based on our past experience. So, like, if we have an experience growing up where, let's say, our parents are hyper concerned about money. Like, I had a client today. I mean, he's in his 50s. He's saved plenty of money. But we basically were talking about why he couldn't get bigger in trades. He works for a hedge fund. He should put more capital to work. Well, he's afraid of losing money. Now, he doesn't actually have any real reason to be afraid of losing money, if you just take the current facts of his situation. He's saved a lot of money. He's bought property, but you go back, and his childhood experience is one where people not saving enough money, it was obvious that was a real problem. So our predictions will be influenced by things we learned in the first 10 years of life. But again, once like, he and I had this whole conversation about how merged these messages from when he was growing up are with his situation today. So once he could be honest about that, he could start to untangle it from what he feels like he should do today. That's like a second or third level of working on this. What am I feeling and why? What am I predicting? But it is really true. It's very psychoanalytical, but it's also now very neuroscience based. We predict based on our past experience. So, like, my dad had nothing growing up. He saved all his money. He invested in the stock market. He was a few months away from dying, and he was worried about running out of money. I mean, there was no possible way he was going to run out of money. But he was just taking that childhood experience, and he couldn't see, like, but that's what he never had the opportunity to do the work to say, how is what am I feeling and why am I feeling it influenced by my past experience? I mean, that's graduate school of this kind of emotions as information, but it is important. I mean, I've had so many clients who, I mean, here's a crazy one. I once had a client who was supposed to be a professional trader. So they're supposed to be sitting at the screen buying and selling stocks, right? They were hypothetically managing their family's money, but they couldn't actually make a decision. Like they could very rarely actually take a trade. We ended up figuring out this person's parents stopped speaking to each other, but didn't get divorced when the kid was like 7. And they were well off. So they lived in a nice house with, a cook and a maid and blah. So like this person grew up in this household where the parents were there, but didn't speak to each other. If you're the kid in that circumstance, you're always going to be like, should I talk to my mom or should I talk to my dad? Who should I talk to today? And if I talk to mom, like, will dad be mad? And like, that would be your whole existence when you were at home after school, right? You would never know it would be awful. I can't even really imagine, but that would still be the kids. And so I suspected that this person was repeating that. Hence, they never knew whether they should buy or sell. And when we got that all out on the table, that should I buy or sell felt like, should I talk to mom or dad? What do you think happened? They were able to trade because they recognized what actually happened to them and what made them feel the way they do. And they assigned it to its actual source. And once they did that, I mean, they could be frustrated and hurt and mad, and think it was ridiculous that their parents behaved that way. And then they could turn around and be like their adult self and make a decision. You untangle that experience that's influencing your prediction.
Very cool.
That's a crazy story, but it's true.
Wow. When you were talking about that, I jumped back into my upbringing from 0 to 10, and something I don't know if I correctly diagnosed, but recently I realized that I have this need to be seen. There's this want, because my parents split up, my dad never saw me, my mum had to work 2 jobs. She really deeply cared about me, but she just didn't have the time. And as a result, linking it to my fear of caring about what people think, this whole business, like right now I am being seen because of my success, and I'm scared of not being seen if I had to go back to work at 9 to 5 and be this failure. So I really care about being seen, and that's linked to caring about what people think.
Yeah, because if they think poorly of you, then they may ignore you, and then you wouldn't be seen.
Wow.
It's just the way the human brain is built. Like we take in all the experience we have when we're young, under 10, like we're developing sort of who we are in the world and how the world's going to treat us and how we need to behave to be okay. And then no one tells us that we're doing this. And, we get to be an adult where we have agency over our own life, but we're using all these old experiences to interpret what's happening. And usually what's happening is not what happened to us before. But people end up recreating it because they expect it, and then they behave in a way that they expected, and then it ends up turning the circumstance to the same thing. So people end up having these repetitive experiences, but it's because they were choosing their behavior out of a prediction that's actually irrelevant to what's in front of them. But it's their brain does it, and until they learn and are willing to navigate that differently, you're kind of, but once you become conscious of it, it loses some of its influence. And as it loses some of its influence, you have a wider sort of range of choices. And each time you make a choice, it might lead you in a slightly different direction, which then creates a new experience that you can predict from. I mean, it takes a lot of new choices to overcome, essentially the self-image we developed, but it's doable and people do it.
Very
So
cool.
you can say to yourself, like, as you're making choices, just say to yourself, I want to be seen. And if you let yourself feel that and articulate it, you'll neutralize it in the way that it may lead you to work on something where you'd be seen as opposed to something that would bring in revenue. You'll neutralize the need for that. And as you neutralize the need for that, you'll be able to make the better choices for whatever it is you really need to accomplish. I mean, maybe being seen ultimately makes you money. I mean, that's entirely possible, but it'll be more realistic.
Yeah, I had a major light bulb. So thanks for sharing that. That was pretty cool exercise we went through. You talked about being honest. Is it better being honest with yourself, sitting in a room on your own, talking to yourself, letting your emotions out honestly, or talking with a partner, best friend, family member, but they may not have the tools to know what to do with what you said?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, generally speaking, it's helpful for us to talk to someone. There's some phenomenon about talking to someone, saying things out loud, talking to an understanding listener that does help us sort things out. I have clients say to me all the time, oh my God, just talking about it, it's more clear to me what I should do. The trick with friends and family is, as you say, like, is the person the right kind of listener? So the person has to be able to just hear what you're saying with no judgment, And that's hard for people. It's hard for a lot of people. Like, their job is to help you sort out what you really think and feel. And no version of don't think that or don't feel that or get over that. And it's hard for us, like I have a friend whose husband recently died. And so I know when she's out with my husband and I, and the four of us used to go out together, and she just starts to cry, I just got to let her cry. But some people will say, oh, don't cry. It's the worst thing you can do. Because they want her to feel better. They may mean well. But like, then she just has to feel guilty. She's sad and she has to feel guilty about being sad. And that doesn't help. So some listeners can't tolerate the person's negative feelings. So they try to get you over them. That doesn't help. So it depends on the listener.
Talking about talking and having a listener, what's your thoughts on religion? People praying, people talking to God, having that conversation. Because a year ago, like I grew up an atheist. Well, my parents are Buddhists, and I don't know. I have a Christian friend that's been teaching me how to pray, and just each morning I would just talk to this figure of God. And I don't know if I'm talking to myself or I'm actually talking to someone. But the fact that it feels like I'm imagining someone listening, it sort of does help cope. I don't know what's really happening there, but what's your thoughts?
Well, if the person praying legitimately feels like God or a God is listening in an unjudgmental way, like a Catholic might have gone to confession with a priest, sort of, then it's going to be helpful. Because how the person feels about are they being heard is what's going to make the difference in whether it's helpful or not. So, I mean, yeah, how the person feels about how they're being heard or not being heard. So if someone believes their God is listening to them, then it should help them.
Makes sense. Denise, when you're working with people traders working within a hedge fund versus working with owners or founders or CEOs of the hedge fund, how do they differ?
That's a really good question. Generally, the people in the hedge fund are still worried whether they're going to make it or not. Like, are they going to be able to keep doing this very, very hard job? I mean, people can denigrate it or make fun of it or, be pejorative about it. But from a mental point of view, it's about the hardest job on the planet, meaning making the actual decision I'm not saying like being a hospice care nurse isn't a more emotionally difficult, or even being in the military, but like from a decision uncertainty, what's the right thing to do? It's so hard. So if you're not the founder who's amassed some level, some decades of success, you're some version of still worried about, like, am I really going to be able to, you wonder if the success you've had is luck, or was it because where you were, where the founders are more worried about, some of them are still worried about trading well. Like I have two different founders of reasonable size hedge funds, not the huge mega hedge funds, but two. I mean, they worry a lot about how they help their people, but some of them also worry about how do I still trade well in the midst of having a team of 20 or 30 or 40 people to manage. The founders of bigger hedge funds do worry about how do I develop my people so they can continue to do well, or they can recover from a bad decision, or, and they're kind of as mystified by human behavior as most people. I mean, they may have some fancy performance coach on staff or whatever, but they're still like, why did they do that? Why did that guy do that? And they're unsure of it.
Interesting.
So I don't know. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, that made me think of, like, as I was watching Succession, the main character, Bobby Axelrod, he has this sort of ego, this arrogance, this confidence, but then at the same time, he does care about people and sort of, it seems, people like us viewers root for him. And I guess, like, a recent experience yesterday that comes to mind is, I have people that don't want me to succeed, and, I don't really want to act on any revenge or anything, but I'm a big component of, that saying, success is the biggest revenge. But then I realized how that might be actually toxic, because yesterday I found out that one of my old peers that doesn't, like, is a bit toxic. He's been following me all this time, and I think I actually like the fact that he's been following, and it probably stings him to do so. And recently I found out that he's no longer following me. And for some reason that hurt me. I was thrown off. Like, why am I thrown off about this toxic person that I cut out of my life no longer following me? Like, it was a bit of annoying that, like, this person was following along, so he was trying to compete against me, and the more he saw what I was doing, that probably egged him to work harder, and I didn't like the fact. But at the same time, I liked the fact that he was seeing my success, and I was, I guess, unintentionally rubbing it in his face. But I guess that wasn't my intention. So I had this weird clash of, like, I try not to, like, I don't want to rub things in people's face, but this feeling I'm feeling says that.
Well, first of all, if someone's rooting for you to fail, which it sort of sounded like he might have been, it's perfectly reasonable for you to be unhappy about that and annoyed. Like, and in your annoyance, wanting to succeed that much more to, like, get back at him, because why should he be rooting for you to fail? Like, that's not nice, right? So a miraculous thing is to be able to feel our justified anger and use it. So the world denigrates anger. The world says, oh, it's going to be toxic, and you should just not worry about this guy, and blah, 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 blah. Anger comes from the recognition that something is wrong. In its pure form. I mean, that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to say, look, I shouldn't be being treated this way, or the situation shouldn't be this way. Like, that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to tell us something shouldn't be the way that it is. So, like, with a person like that, like, of course you're angry at him, and of course you want, like, to succeed even that much more. And that's okay. Like, that's okay. So guilt about anger, which is what the world fosters. The world says, oh, don't be angry. Being angry is toxic. Being angry is going to hurt your health, blah, blah, blah. So all that happens is people are angry, they suppress it, and they feel guilty. So are they in any better shape than if they just say, you know what? I am really unhappy that this person is sort of rooting for my failure. Of course you're unhappy. Okay. Well, admitting that may allow you just, like, well, whatever. He can, he can spend his time rooting for my failure, but I'm going to go on and do what I'm going to do. Or, gee, I need to do this, this, and this to be even more successful. There, I have a crazy story about anger, and it's complicated, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's a long, convoluted story, but I landed in the office of a person that's known as a modern psychoanalyst. This was the year 2000. And a modern psychoanalyst is very different than a Freudian psychoanalyst. A Freudian psychoanalyst will do a little bit of what I did, where, you're doing this because that happened to you growing up. A modern psychoanalyst won't do so much of that. That's called interpretation. A modern psychoanalyst will just try to understand your experience, help you get in touch with your pure anger, the part that's trying to help you, and help you get okay with it, and then essentially use it to get what you want. And I found out in a class that the people who'd figured out this modern psychoanalytic way to work with people had, this is going to sound crazy, but cured schizophrenia, cured multiple personality. I don't know what the proper term for schizophrenia or multiple personality is, by helping the victims of it, if you will, become okay with their anger. The person's name is Hyman Spotnitz. He's dead now, but he had this hypothesis that the anger was so overwhelming, people were splitting it off into like separate personas because it was so overwhelming. And if he could help them understand it and become okay with it and manage it a different way, they wouldn't have to split it off into a different persona. And someone in the class said, yeah, I used to be diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic, and now I'm just, normal New Yorker. And the person was a cartoonist at the New Yorker, which I thought was a great job for a former. But in any event, it was all through recognizing the value of anger. And that's the seed of how I'm sitting here, because I was like, wow, if it could do that, I literally said, well, if it could do that, it could help these crazy traders I work with. But I also thought I should bring this to the world because this is such a powerful thing. Like, yes, it can help these crazy traders, but this is a theory on human behavior that should not be lost in the, whatever, fog of history. So I'm not an expert. I have been trained by a lot of modern psychoanalysts. There are institutes of modern psychoanalysis around the world, but it's not a well-known thing. But at its core is like, when we're angry, there's usually a darn good reason, deep down. Maybe it's all messed up and distorted and all of that, but deep down, there's usually a good reason. And it's usually some version of something's happening to us that shouldn't be happening. And that's what it's meant to help us know. So then we go, well, you know what? This shouldn't be happening. How do I fix this? Now, maybe with your friend, it's just like, or your former friend or this person, like you just go, well, whatever, whatever. But you get more okay with it because you realize like your feeling about it is legit. Your feeling about it is your psyche trying to protect you. This person shouldn't be doing this. Shouldn't be rooting for your failure.
Interesting. And now if I were to look back to how I was yesterday, I was like, if I'm really honest at myself, I knew that him watching my success caused him pain. And I was angry at the fact that he stopped following me and he's no longer going to be in pain, which is evil. That sounds really bad.
Well, my guess is there's more to it than that. There's more to it than that. It's you're not just disappointed that this person's not going to be in pain anymore. There's more to it. Like, yeah, there's some history or something else there going on.
Makes sense. I agree. You talked about using your anger to get what you want. How do people know what they want? Does everyone have a unique why or purpose? Is me wanting to be seen and I have this drive to make other people feel seen? Is that my why? Is that my purpose?
Well, it might be. I mean, I'd have to talk to you more, but a lot of people don't really know what they want, or they sort of kind of know. They might feel guilty about it, or they think it's so impossible, they'll never get it. It's not even worth acknowledging. I will say this. If you're honest with yourself about what you want, the chances you get it improve. No matter how remote it seems, if you admit it to yourself, life has a way of like presenting you opportunities that move you in that direction, even if it seems impossible.
Is there any exercise or ways for people to either find or confirm if their why or purpose is truly their why or purpose?
Well, I think it's sorting through what you feel, honestly, and being honest and getting to what really seems true to you. I mean, people are handed a lot of distorting factors. Like I have a number of clients who, they're married, they have children, maybe they're married for the second time and they have, two families. I have clients whose parents were either never successful or successful and lost everything, and they have to take care of their parents. And so they feel all this obligation to support, their immediate family, their parents, whatever. Sometimes in the midst of like that reality, it gets hard to know, like what's beyond that, like beyond supporting my children and my parents, what's my purpose? Well, maybe for now that is your purpose, that doesn't mean it's your life purpose. There's all kinds of stories of people like, living their life through their 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s, having their early career, having a family and whatever, going back to law school, going back to medical school, finally getting their college degree, becoming a writer. Like if you look up stories of people who have made it after 50, after 60, even after 70, it's crazy. So maybe people are in a circumstance where like right now your life purposes involves taking care of, your current family or your current situation. It doesn't mean it's your forever purpose. I mean, the average person probably doesn't know this, but the famous investor Warren Buffett didn't really start like managing money and being so successful managing money until he was in his 50s. I mean, he's like the most famous investor in the world. And if you read about him, I honestly think he was like 56 or 7 or something, like when he really got started. I mean, I have a friend who, I've long since lost track of her. This was a high school friend, but she got married young. She became a hairdresser. She didn't go to college. Everyone thought she was pretty and sweet, but not that smart. She had, I think, 5 kids. And at 32 years old, decided she was going to be a doctor, went back to college, went to medical school, finished raising her kids, and opened her own family practice at 42 years old. And no one even ever thought she was smart, let alone college, medical school. So it ain't over till it's over, for one thing, and there are phases in life, people can feel like, I have a client who's 23 and sort of feels like, oh, I didn't get to do what I was supposed to do, which was play professional soccer. So like, what am I going to do with my life? And I'm like, there might be a lot of lifetimes between now and, my age, for example. So again, though, the very first thing I said to you is be honest with yourself. I'm going to go back to that. Like, what does it seem like your purpose is? And what do you really want? Like, what would you like anyone to accomplish? Maybe it is give your family a good life. Okay, well, that's a pretty good purpose. Maybe it is bigger than that. Maybe it is. For me, when I learned that you had to have emotion to make a decision, which I learned that in 2003, there's a book called Descartes' Error that Antonio Damasio wrote in the late 90s. And Descartes said, I think, therefore I am, the French philosopher. And Damasio basically says, the research says, I feel, therefore I am. That's what that book's about. I was like, that changes everything. If you have to have emotion to make a decision, emotions function as information, and that changes everything. And basically, I think I should try to tell the world that. And I have never, but I was, I don't know how old I was, 40-ish, I just decided if the science said emotions are information effectively, someone needed to tell the world, so might as well be me. And then I could start to see actually how my entire life made me the person where that was easier for me to do than maybe some other people. I gave a talk at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange in 2005 or 6, I don't remember. And I got up and I told 250 guys, and there were a few women in the audience, but basically 250 guys that they had to like use their emotion because I knew it to be true from the science. And I got a call, well, I think it was an email from a professor at Northwestern University. And it literally said, I cannot believe you just got up and told a room of guys that they have to use their emotions. And I'm like, Well, they do. It's the truth. So, I mean, there are still people out there who think I'm that crazy lady who talks about emotion, but do I care? I've always known that, first of all, once I started consulting, I sort of knew, well, I can't have all the clients in the world. I can only have a small subset of clients anyway. I'm only one person. So I don't need everybody to believe me. And as long as I know I'm telling the truth, if a person doesn't believe me, it's their loss, not mine. But I didn't find that as a purpose in life until I was writing that paper that I read Damasio's research for. But I could see, and other people could see, how all these really disparate experiences I had put me in a position to both recognize it, talk about it, doing a good job of talking about it, and making it understandable to people, crazy things that had happened to me that just put me in a position. So I think we never really know where life is leading us. But again, if we're honest with ourselves about what we think and what we want, the chances it leads us to getting some of that or being able to do some of that improve.
Denise, when you talk about emotions, does it apply to all the disciplined great athletes like Cristiano, Ronaldo, Muhammad Ali, Alexander the Great? Were they really emotional people, or did they just push aside their emotions and just push and grind through life, and just, despite how they felt, they were working out every day? Or is that one and the same thing?
Well, my answer is going to be yes. So what people might do in that circumstance is they really want to be, the best footballer in the world. So what's that? That's desire, right? Like, that's an emotion. That's what I want more than anything. Well, what do I have to do to be the best footballer in the world? I have to work out every day. I have to put more weight on that, leg press. Like, I have to feel uncomfortable. I have to do the thing today that today I don't want to do. But because my bigger desire to get the thing I really want, I got to do this thing. So you're choosing which emotion you're going to act on. I am a big fan of leveraging desire, and professional athletes, whether they know it or not, they leverage their desire. You don't put yourself through those kind of training regimens unless you really want to win. So yes, on a given day, they may set aside how they feel in the moment, get themselves out of bed, go to the gym, not eat the hot fudge sundae, not have the martini, whatever, because the other thing they want is a bigger emotion.
Interesting. Now, with the current landscape of media, TikTok, dopamine, porn, fast food, there's just so much dopamine, and it seems like the next generation is being rewired in a bad way, where the amount of dopamine they get from scrolling through TikTok far outweighs their emotional desire for whatever their why might be. Do you believe that's happening? Is that an issue? Or is it not that big of a deal and it's not as bad as I think?
I basically believe it's happening for this reason. I'm on social media somewhat, not obviously anywhere near as much as a college student might be. But there are moments where, like, I'll look at Instagram and I'll be like, I'm scrolling and I don't even want to be scrolling, but I can't stop scrolling.
Mm.
Like, how can that be? And then I'll go, okay, stop scrolling. So how could that be? I don't even care, like, what I'm seeing. So it's probably real. Like, if it can do that to me, what do we do about it? I mean, like, I don't think, so ban social media is not going to happen, right? Have people completely get off social media is not going to happen. I mean, I'm certainly glad I'm not a teenage girl with social media. It's hard enough to be a teenage girl where everybody's only posting the best version of themselves, with a filter, with their happiest moments, and they're not posting. Like, I can tell everybody, you never know what goes on behind closed doors, but it is not what you see on Instagram or TikTok. I guess I think the answer is education, Again, like, what does social media make you want? Like, okay, and will spending more time on TikTok help you get it? Right. That doesn't mean you can't, like, finish your homework and then say, I'm going to spend an hour on TikTok, whatever, but we'll get you what you want. But it has to be okay for people to want things. There's even, in some segments of self-help, there's even a guilt trip about wanting things. You're sort of not supposed to really want anything, How does that help anybody? Like, you need a motivating factor, like in order to do things that move you forward in life, you have to want something. If you don't want anything, like some people would advise, you have no guiding light.
Talking about
Again, choosing an emotion.
Talking about really processing and feeling your emotions, I had these two other guests on the show and they talked about having unlimited energy. And I asked them, like, are there days where you just wake up and you feel down and tired and you just don't want to do work? What do you do in those circumstances? And the reply was, I feel that feeling, I really internalize it. I let it flow through me. And as I'm doing that, I feel like my energy's slowly like bubbling up like a sort of cup that's slowly overfilling. And if I'm constantly doing this throughout the day, I'm constantly recharged, and by the end of the day, I have more energy than I started the day. What's your thoughts on that, Denise? Because you do talk a lot about feeling your emotions, and they talk about how that can actually lead to energy.
Well, I think implicit in that is they are validating their own feelings. Like, I think maybe it sounds like they may have been saying, I might wake up frustrated with this. So like, I admit I feel frustrated with it. Okay, this is what it really is. I feel like concerned that, overcoming that challenge is going to be difficult. And they're honest with themselves, it sounds like.
And one more thing they added was like, if they don't gain energy, at least if you process and feel those feelings, you're not losing energy. You're sort of staying at neutral.
Yeah. I mean, that's the same thing. It's Lindsay, admitting she was afraid. It's my client today admitting he was worried. There's something about that conscious articulation of the feeling our body is giving us that empowers us. And when we try to do anything else, intellectually talk ourselves out of it, distract ourselves from it, it either gets bigger or comes back to bite us in some other way.
And Denise, with all the wisdom that you have, I always often think about having kids. Were you able to pass on everything you know onto your children, or are kids unique in their own right and there's no way to mold them to be a mini-me?
Help them understand what are they feeling and why. And what do they want to accomplish? And what, like, yeah, it's the same. Kids are also like an example I used to give. I'm not in a circumstance to give this anymore, but I don't know for why, but I used to see so many people who were sort of so worried about their kids knowing about a different religion, like we want our kids to believe this. So we don't really want them to socialize with this other family that believes that. And if you take a second grader or a fourth grader, or even a 12-year-old, and you say, we believe this, and this about God and, the universe and God and life after death. But the family down the street, they believe, A, B, and C instead of X, Y, Z. The kid will go, okay. Like the kid just goes, okay. They don't get they might say, okay, which one do you really think it is? Well, we obviously think God is this, but they have the reasons for thinking God is that. And kids are like, okay, they don't get all weirded out about it. And that is so true. Kids are so much smarter than people give them credit for. They pick up on things, they know things, they can sense tension. You can't really lie to a kid all that effectively. But if you just tell a kid the truth, they go, okay. And then they go back to being worried about whatever they're worried about, like whatever they're narcissistic, they need to do whatever, finish their homework, play baseball with so-and-so, they don't get all tripped up with conflicts that trip up adults.
As a high performer yourself, Denise, and you building and training high performers, did you feel a pressure or need or want to create a high performer of your own?
You mean for me?
Yeah,
Like me for myself?
for your children.
I don't have children, human children. I have dogs, and I have all these clients all over the world who are now perceived to be my children. So I do feel, sometimes I feel more pressure to help my clients achieve what they want than I actually should feel, because at the end of the day, it's up to them.
Mm,
I can lead the horse to water. I can't make the horse drink.
mm.
Does that answer the question?
I think that does. Where like if I had a kid, all I could do is lead the horse to water, but it's up to the child to drink the water. And if the child doesn't, I guess I got unlucky.
So I tell people this a lot because it's relevant. There is a concept in psychoanalysis developed in the 1940s called the good enough mother. And basically what this psychoanalyst showed was you don't have to be perfect. But like if the kid knows you love them, you support them, you listen to them, you have some respect for their experience, and you're willing to let them figure out some stuff on their own, like you're willing to let them struggle in order to learn, you're probably the good enough mother or the good enough father. Like if they know you're there, they know you care, you make them feel like their experience is valuable, like you respect their experience as the child, and you give them some room to figure things out on their own, it's probably good enough.
And Denise, given that you're always listening and helping others, who listens to you? Do you have a psychiatrist that you go to? Do you just listen to yourself? Is it yourself? Is it a religion? Is it God? Is it your partner? And do you train the partner to listen how you'd like to listen? Or did you find a partner that had those skill sets and hence that person is your partner? Who listens to you?
Well, I am really good at listening to myself. I use all my own advice all the time.
Mm.
But having said that, I originally learned it from this modern psychoanalyst. Her name was Deborah Brzezinski. She's passed away now. But she worked with her husband, whose name is Charles Brzezinski. He is 70 something. He's a psychoanalyst in New York City. I still talk to him on a somewhat regular basis. I also, when I met my husband, took him to some classes at their institute. So he works with Charles also. So I inadvertently taught him to be a good listener. And then actually right now we only have one other performance coach at ReThink, a guy named John Burns, but John works with Charles also. So I've had, at one point we had two, me, Bill, John, and another guy. Now we only have me, Bill, and John, but we all do some work with Charles. I don't work with him as much as I used to, but like now that I have a particularly challenging client, I talk to him once a week. And sometimes it's just blah, 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 and he's helping me sort out like what I feel about it and why.
That is so cool, Denise. I usually wrap these podcasts with two questions. One, any recent discoveries that you have implemented to your life?
Sunlight, the value of sunlight. So I'd heard about the value of sunlight and circadian rhythms, and I'd used it to travel between New York and Asia, and managed to go to New York, Hong Kong, and back twice before the pandemic with no jet lag. There's an app called Time Shifter that will let you put in the flights, and it'll tell you if you really follow it, you cannot have jet lag. But I started, via Instagram, right? Like seeing these people who were talking about the science of circadian rhythms. And one of them is get sunlight in your eyes first thing in the morning before you look at screens. So last summer I decided, well, what the heck? It was, by the time it was summer, it was warm outside in the morning. I might as well go outside and have my coffee first thing in the morning, because what have I got to lose? I lost 15 pounds. It just fell off me. Like, and I'm, a postmenopausal woman. Every postmenopausal woman knows that, like, it's hard to, you don't necessarily get huge, but, you put on 10 or 15 pounds you don't want to have. And then you add the pandemic, like, just fell off me. Why? Because seeing that sunlight sets your cortisol, which is like your most important hormone for energy. And then like all these other hormones flow from what your cortisol slope is. It's supposed to be high in the morning and low at night. Melatonin is supposed to replace it. Our bodies know what time it is and what hormones to release by sunlight. So you want to get sunlight in your eyes Certainly first thing in the morning, but preferably for a few minutes here and there during the day. And you don't want to be staring at your screens in the evening unless you're wearing blue blocking glasses, because the light coming from the screens is telling us it's like high noon, for you all in December, for me in June, high noon at the hottest day of the year. You don't want your body being told that at 9 o'clock at night. You want your body being told it's nighttime, it's time to produce melatonin, you want to get sleepy, go to bed and sleep through the night. Sunlight. There's a podcast, it's a whole podcast with bunches of episodes called the Quantum Biology Collective. I was recently on it, but they interview all sorts of different doctors. The value of sunlight.
Wow. One quick segue question on that is, do you have a morning routine, Denise? Anything to clear your mind, to get ready for the chaotic day?
I get up, I help my husband feed the dogs. I now feed the birds, and I have a pet duck. So I feed the pet duck, who's learned that I'm going to feed him and will wait outside until I come out. I try to eat some protein first. I learned all this from the Quantum Biology Collective people. I drink some electrolytes, try to eat some protein, and I try to delay coffee for 90 minutes. Sometimes they succeed. I don't usually succeed the whole 90 minutes. And I get outside. I either get in our hot tub and watch the sunrise, or I just walk around and watch the sunrise. I have done this almost every day for a year now. And then I try to not start my client work until 8:30. I don't always succeed in that, but that gives me time to sit down, check, what are my priorities for the day? How many clients do I have? Just get organized. I've always been a person that if I feel organized, I can do just about anything. I don't know whether astrology is true or not, but I am a Virgo, and it tends to be a Virgo trait. I just always behave that way. And so that sort of slow, hanging out with the dogs and the birds, getting the protein, then having the coffee, getting the sunlight, getting a little bit organized, and then I start talking to people.
How do you consume the protein? Is it just straight protein powder? Is it nuts?
What I try to do is have leftovers from dinner. So lamb chops is one of my favorite ones because they're just so easy to eat a couple lamb chops. But I lean carnivore. I definitely lean low carb, although I'm not as good at it as I used to be. When I went very low carb, it completely changed my sleep. I went from sort of fitfully sleeping to sleeping like a teenager by cutting out carbs. I had learned years ago from a naturopath that I was allergic to gluten, cow's milk, soy, and egg whites. And when I took those things mostly out of my diets, I was no longer allergic to my dogs. And so that converted me to alternative medicine. And if you think about it, I mean, food is thy medicine, right? What you put in your body is gonna, so I have doctors who will say things like, I can't believe how healthy you are. You don't need to come see me, because then they don't believe me, but it's the not eating gluten, dairy, soy, and egg whites, and eating mostly meat and vegetables. But, tonight, when I get off here, I'm going to have bacon and eggs for dinner.
And with the naturopath, they would diagnose different things for each person, right? Each person would have a unique diet that works for them, that sort of works for you, but might not work for everyone else, right?
Yeah, in the case of this particular, she was a chiropractor, then trained as a naturopath in New York City, and she had a company in Washington that did her testing for allergies. She said she rarely got someone who was allergic to all four, because those were the things she tested for, or not allergic to any of them. So I was allergic to all four, and my husband was allergic to none of them. Yeah. Although he's very supportive. He will not eat gluten for the most part, but I mean, honestly, I was so alert. I had two beautiful little Yorkshire Terriers. People who have followed me for years used to know of the Yorkshire Terrier. I'd have them on webcams with me, and and I was so allergic. Mount Sinai in New York are like, you have to get rid of these dogs. And I'm like, that's like telling me to get rid of my children. That ain't happening. And I didn't even really go to the naturopath directly for the allergy to the dogs, but it ended up, she literally said, once you stop eating that stuff, which your body is sensitive to, and it's causing your immune system to react. If you stop asking your immune system to react to that, it's going to be able to handle the dogs. And that's exactly what happened.
Okay, see a naturopath. I'll put that onto my to-do list. Last question is, any personal goals or focus over the next 6 months, Denise?
Over the years, I have had many, many, many people ask me if they can work for me or if they can be trained by me. And I have very, very, very many times said I just don't have the bandwidth. But I have decided that a way to extend this work is to train people in what I know. So we are working on developing a Shull method, which is hard for me to say. I've gotten used to it, but a Shull method training program. And it is a priority for me. I just, like I am with most things, I want to do it right. And, that means thinking it through and
That's
putting a
awesome.
program in place that does actually train people and is useful to them.
That is so cool. Because I think, yeah, I was surprised we dug on so many different topics. And I think what you teach and what you talk about is contrary to the mainstream about sort of feeling anger, using it, feeling your emotions, acknowledging that you want to go on TikTok and get some dopamine and not feeling guilty for doing so. Like yesterday, I also spent 2 hours just watching some TV show, The Walking Dead, and I was just binging some clips. And I guess it's like I felt guilty and I should just feel that guilt and not fight it. And yeah, it makes sense. So I think trying to get more people to sort of teach this Shull method would bring a lot of value to this sort of confusing world that's happening.
Most people will do the right thing or the good thing much more of the time than the world gives them credit for. So basically, the reason I say that is if you're less judgmental about yourself, like, you know what, I'm going to spend tonight watching TV, or I'm going to spend an hour on TikTok before I do my homework or whatever. If you stop the guilt, like, chances are you'll be able to do more of the thing that gets you the other thing you want. I mean, nobody wants a life of all they've ever done is be on TikTok. I mean, nobody wants a life. But they don't get the chance to even go, well, right now I want to be on TikTok, but like, I wish I could be a doctor or, when I grow up, or I wish I could be whatever. Like, if they can just put all of that into words and then go, okay, well, what do I need to do to get both things?
Yeah. And like I'm thinking back to yesterday, like that guilt turned into anger. Like it went from feeling guilty to now me being angry at myself. Is the remedy to just feeling those emotions, right? Like just feel angry and be okay to feel angry? Or what did you mean by sort of not feeling guilty? How does someone not feel guilty?
Well, but you just go, okay, I feel guilty about watching this. Okay,
Mm.
well, how guilty? Or am I going to like feel guilty and do it anyway? Or sometimes just saying you feel guilty will dissipate the guilt somewhat. Like if you're actually feeling, and then you might be able to go, okay, I'm going to spend 1 hour doing this. And then I'm going to be tired, so I'm going to go to bed earlier. So I'm going to get up a little bit earlier, and then I'm going to get this other stuff done in the morning. Like, it's people beating themselves up that oftentimes keeps them doing the thing that holds them in place. So, and this actually even goes back to the anger, like what Spotnitz and the modern psychoanalysts learned is oftentimes the way we process anger is to turn it on ourselves so we get hyper self-critical. So, like, if we can stop the hyper self-critical, sometimes by just accepting what we want and how we feel, the chances that we actually do the thing we want to do go up. Generally speaking, I mean, this isn't 100% true, but generally speaking, people are too self-critical. We're too hard on ourselves. We beat ourselves up too much. People will say, oh, that person doesn't work very hard, or oh, they spend too much time on TikTok or whatever. So therefore they're bad, they're lazy. Well, that's usually not what's really going on. Like you get below the surface, maybe they're anxious, they can't really do their algebra homework. And so they are avoiding that anxiety by just staying on TikTok. Well, so they're not lazy, they're scared. And maybe what they need is someone to help them with their algebra homework. I'm talking teenagers, obviously, but oftentimes, so we're like so prone to be critical and call people lazy and call, it's usually not what's really going on.
Yeah, as I'm breaking down my emotions, it's like there's accounting. The accounting is hard. I'm scared to attack it. I know my phone is right there. That's going to be fun. So I'm going to quickly distract myself and get myself some emotional relief by jumping on TikTok and Instagram Reels because I'm scared of this challenging accounting task because it's not fun and it's not in my DNA. So that's what's happening.
Yeah. So if you're saying, okay, you know what, this is like, I don't really want to do this. This is really frustrating. I'm scared I won't be able to get it done right. Okay. I'm going to spend 10 minutes on TikTok or Instagram or whatever and let myself calm down. And then I'm going to try to tackle it for half an hour. I do that. I'll check Twitter or Instagram or whatever to kind of settle myself down. And then after 5 or 10 minutes, go, okay, you know, like, now what? I mean, I get, you know, like I have an accountant that forever makes mistakes. I mean, they've been my accountant for 20 years. In totality, they do a very good job for me. But like I'll start, like last year, I started in June, you know, because the deadline's October if you do an extension here. Like, let's get this done. The night before, we were still redoing things. Like, I would never do things that way. Now, maybe I should fire them and get to, but like in, you know, as that's happening, sometimes I have to like, you know, chill. And so I'll maybe go on Instagram. But I'm conscious that I'm chilling, like, okay, like just let this settle out for a few minutes before you write that snarky email. Like I'm making a choice, distract myself with Instagram for a few minutes so I can, you know, not call my accountant up and scream at him for being late or whatever. Or like we're forever getting notices. You know, we moved to Utah and we have different taxes, and like Utah's really like, you forgot to file this form, you forgot to file that form. Well, they're supposed to file them. I'm not supposed to, that's what I pay them for. And then they always take care of it, but we have to remind them. I get aggravated, you know? I need a few minutes to like, but I'm always, I mean, what am I feeling and why? What am I feeling and why? What am I feeling? I mean, just like, I think you're working with the system as the system is designed. I mean, what the research shows is we are because we feel. Like, there's research at Stanford that shows, like, if you look at a probability distribution, a normal distribution, the immediate thing that happens is you feel calm. If you look at a skewed distribution, the immediate thing that happens is you feel anxiety. The feeling comes first. All that stuff about the thoughts come first and cause the feeling is wrong. It's just wrong. Just wrong. The feeling comes first. And it then causes the thought. So if you start to work with it that way, there's a lot less static in the system. You're a lot more accurate. You can navigate yourself much more effectively. And I really should stop.
Quick side tangent on that point. So would the solution be like, I'm angry because my accountant is not doing this, and now we're getting late. Now the Utah government, they keep sending me letters. I don't want to get fined. I'm angry that they keep doing this again and again. I guess I could fire them, but they've done a great job over the last 20 years. So on the totality of everything, they're pretty good. So I can't really fire them. Let me just jump on TikTok for 10 minutes to calm myself down before I send that email. And this is probably going to happen again, but based on what I just thought, like in total, they're good. So I deal with I deal with the cons because of the pros. Is that what would go through your mind?
What would go through my mind is, you know, I want to call him up, or I want to immediately say, how the hell did this happen again? Like, we shouldn't have to be doing this. So in my case, it's not TikTok, it's either Instagram or Twitter, X, but I'm never going to call it X. And then the email I send is, Eric, how are we going to prevent this from happening in the future? You know, instead of attacking them. I mean, I'm not sure we ever will prevent it from happening in the future completely, but at this point in time, I'm willing to tolerate that periodic, you know, extreme frustration, because in totality, they've done a very good job in my taxes all these years. And the hassle of changing, you know, like I trust them, right? Like I trust them in the sense that I know they're going to do like a B+ job, right? And, you know, my information is secure and all of that. Like, if I have to go find a new accountant, Where do I start? How do you know really what you don't know? You mean you don't really know what a job anyone will do until they do it.
Mm.
So, at the end of the day, it probably falls into the devil you know versus the one you don't.
Yeah. Denise, where can people
But
get?
we're almost done with my taxes this year, and it's only May.
Oh, so it's worked out.
We're not going to be doing it at the last day in September and October.
So it's worked out that hopefully the periodic sort of it stopped with that decisive email that you sent with the 10-minute cooldown.
We're moving in the right direction.
That's amazing to hear, Denise. Denise, where can people get more of you? Where can they get just more Denise?
Well, my website is the rethinkgroup.net. Somewhere on there is a press page with lots of interviews. I don't think they're all on there, honestly. So like Google and YouTube and whatnot probably has more even than our website. Yeah, the rethinkgroup.net. Or I'm on Twitter as Denise K, my middle initial Shull. I mean, lately I've been mostly tweeting about Robert Kennedy and politics, but in totality, I tweet about a lot of things. Mm. And I interact on Twitter. I mean, I answer people and I comment, and so I'm active there.
Okay, we'll put all the links below. Thank you so much for your time today, Denise. I love how honest you are, how non-judgmental you are, how mission-focused you are. Like, this episode has been so value-packed. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Really, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And you asked really good questions and gave really good examples. So I talk a lot, but I think, we did a good job in totality.
I believe so too. Guys, if you've made it this far, hopefully you guys got a ton of value. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And I'll see you guys next week on another episode of the podcast. Peace.
Between the number of client calls I have in a given day and then the stuff you have to do to manage a business and 5 or 6 people who work for me in accounting and legal and
Wow.
I'm gonna develop a Shull method training program. That's my project.
How do you maintain your energy these days with like your packed schedule? Like when I do consulting calls with clients, if I have a day with 5 or 6 clients, I teach people how to build an online e-commerce business. We have a training for that. But like by the end of the day, I'd be spent.
Oh, it happens, but I very much manage my sleep, and I use the whole sunlight, cortisol, melatonin, blue blocking glasses, trying to eat dinner early. Like normally I would have eaten dinner before I talked to you at like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh, wow.
But my husband was on a call, you and I had this, but I try to eat early so that I can sleep. Because if you eat earlier, your digestion happens earlier and then you can get more deep sleep when you first go to sleep. So I'm very zealous about managing my life to get enough sleep so that I have enough energy. Because if I don't, 2 nights last week, I didn't get enough sleep. I can get through my client calls usually, because I'm just talking to people. I know what I'm talking about, but all the extra stuff, I can't think straight. I can't make a decision, so that all just gets put off.
Oh, wow. Are you intermittent fasting where you have like a 16-hour window where you don't eat from, I guess, 3 till 8? Is that 6? Yeah. Do you do that?
I mean, I used to really do it by not eating in the morning. Now I'm way less conscious of that. Other than I don't think about intermittent fasting anymore. I think about eating earlier so I can sleep better. And then I think about getting protein first thing in the morning, because the quantum biology people ended up saying that was really important. There's like a guy on there who's like a military guy who gave this whole thing about the timing of food. And so once Bill and I heard that, we're like, we're going to try to eat dinner like late afternoon. Well, then that gets you depending on what, if I eat at 3 and I don't eat in the morning till 7 a.m., that's whatever, 16 hours.
Yeah. Wow. After this, I'll go eat a banana and stare at the sunlight.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Denise. This is so
Thank
fun.
you.
I'd love to stay in contact. I'll definitely keep you updated with the episode. It'll probably come out in 2 months' time, probably early July. Yeah, this was so fun. I know it's late there, so I appreciate you doing it. I appreciate you shifting your dinner schedule. So thank you.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Denise. Have a beautiful
Talk to you
week,
again. Bye,
and I'll keep you
Andy.
updated. Bye.
Bye.
Given that you're always listening, who listens to you?
I am really good at listening to myself. I use all my own advice all the time.